Imagine a group of hackers who managed to steal $950 million from banks, and no one could figure out anything about them. These hackers were extremely skilled, and what made it even more difficult to trace was that these thefts didn't happen in just one country, they occurred in over 30 countries worldwide. Not only that, but they hacked the banks and made them distribute money to people through ATMs. In today's story, you'll hear about one of the biggest electronic heists in the world. Was there really a flaw in the bank's systems? But what the bank manager and employees didn't know was that this was just the tip of the iceberg, as they were now caught in one of the largest cyberattacks in the world. And the issue with the ATM, which started dispensing cash, didn't happen at just one bank in Ukraine, it happened at several banks. This is when the issue spread to multiple banks across the world. At this point, they contacted a cybersecurity company called Kaspersky, one of the strongest cybersecurity companies, to help solve the problem. The members of Kaspersky tried to figure out what was wrong with these ATMs. After some time of work, they discovered that the issue wasn't a malfunction at all, it was hacking and a cyber attack. After thorough investigation, they realized they were dealing with one of the most sophisticated crimes in history. They understood that they were up against highly skilled and professional hackers. And the most alarming part was that a major company like Kaspersky couldn't even identify the people behind this hack. Even the simplest thing, like pinpointing the location of the hack, eluded them. They couldn't determine the country from which these banks were hacked. Afterward, everyone started talking about these thefts, and the public themselves gave these hackers a name since nobody knew who they were. They called them the Carbanak Cyber Gang. This first theft was just a simple strategy in their playbook because, with their other strategies, they managed to steal over $850 million. Of course, this amount wasn't from just one bank, it was from hundreds of banks all around the world. The police found it difficult to track down this highly mobile group. These attacks continued until Kaspersky Lab uncovered the truth and realized that this hacker group was stealing thousands of dollars daily from banks everywhere. What's even more surprising is that they didn't face any issues, nobody could stop them, and nobody could even find them. You'll see how they came up with a variety of theft methods in an incredible way. Every day they thought of a different way to steal. Like in one of their thefts, they hacked into banks, accessed customers' accounts, and took $1 or $2 from each account. They did this so subtly that customers wouldn't even notice, and at the same time, the bank wouldn't make a big fuss about it because it would hurt their reputation if they admitted that such a theft had occurred. So, the bank would quietly take responsibility without making a public statement, avoiding any damage to their reputation. This kind of quick, subtle theft was just a small-scale operation. They had many other strategies, and now I will tell you about 3 of their strategies, one of which allowed them to steal millions of dollars daily. You might be wondering why I haven't yet mentioned the ATMs. What was the hackers' goal in making ATMs spit out cash? What was in it for them? Simply put, these hackers breached the ATMs, making them dispense money. All they had to do was send their associates to be near the ATM when it exploded with cash, grab as much money as possible, and leave, especially since everyone around would be grabbing money too. It would be hard to tell that these people were part of the hackers' plan. Now, you might be thinking, what about the ATM cameras? What about the bank's security cameras? Wouldn't they be caught on tape? The hacker who breached the ATM didn't just stop there, they either disabled the cameras or deleted the storage inside them, which is actually quite simple. We'll get into more details about the cameras later. This was indeed their simplest strategy, and they saw that it didn't yield a high return, so they rarely used this method. That's why I'll move on to the second strategy, which is easier, safer, and more profitable for them. Their second strategy was to obtain bank customers' accounts. They would access customer accounts and use them to transfer the stolen money to themselves. Let me explain this better. This group would hack into the bank's networks, and once they were inside, they would inflate customer accounts. How would they inflate customer accounts? For example, if someone had $1,000 in their account, they would add a 0 to make it $10,000, and then transfer the excess amount. The client's original $1,000 stays the same, but the hackers pocket the $9,000 difference by transferring it to their hidden accounts. This entire process happens in seconds, so the client or account holder doesn't notice anything, and the bank remains unaware. This inflation strategy is very clever, but it wasn't making them a huge amount of money, so they decided to implement a third strategy. The third strategy involved gaining access to the bank's internal networks. With this strategy, they were able to transfer massive amounts of money. How did they transfer these large sums? By using the bank's internal fund transfer system, they could move substantial amounts of money through the bank's own accounts. This allowed them to transfer huge sums without raising any alarms. Imagine that the third strategy they used was causing banks to lose between $2.5 million to $10 million annually. And we're not just talking about one bank, we're talking about hundreds of banks around the world. At this point, complaints from banks started to increase, with more and more reports coming in. The police began receiving calls from banks saying that $10 million had been stolen from their online platform. Then, shortly after, another bank reported that $7.3 million had been stolen from their platform. At this point, the police immediately began to link the first, second, and third thefts and started to realize that all these robberies were the work of the same group, the Cyberattacks cyber gang. These hackers, more than 100 banks in 30 different countries were hacked. When the police began to connect these thefts, they noticed something strange. Most of the targeted banks were in Russia, China, and Ukraine. This was a good lead for the police because for a long time, they hadn't been able to find anything about the hackers. Now, you might be wondering, okay, they stole the money, but can't the bank just track the funds back to the account they were transferred to and catch the owner? No, dear viewer, it's not that simple. When these hackers stole the money, they would convert it to cryptocurrencies so it couldn't be tracked, or they would transfer it to prepaid debit cards, making it even harder to trace. This allowed them to spend the money freely. Another thing that made it even harder for the police to catch them was that the banks were very cautious about announcing that thefts had occurred. This would be very embarrassing for the banks and would damage their credibility in the market, so they tried to cover up the thefts, making it even harder to catch the hackers. I've told you about 4 types of thefts they committed, but there were many more. If you noticed, each theft was completely different from the others, which made it hard to determine that the same people were behind them, especially when the crimes took place in different countries. According to the managing director of Kaspersky Lab, these people were unbelievably smart. Imagine, in one of the thefts, they hacked into the bank's surveillance cameras. Through these cameras and the bank's systems, they were able to obtain the passwords of the bank employees, allowing them to access the bank's systems and the employees' devices at will. They would start transferring money, stealing information about the bank, and collecting customer data. After they were done, they would disappear without a trace, and no one would have noticed them. Later, when the bank discovered something was wrong, they would start suspecting internal theft, thinking that one of the employees was behind it. Can you imagine how clever they were? According to the European Union Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation, Europol, the Cyberattacks cyber gang was responsible for stealing more than €1 billion since the beginning of their cyber attacks. €1 billion? Can you imagine that number? Europol stated that most of their money was stolen from financial institutions. In March 2018, Europol finally announced that one of the masterminds behind the Cyberattacks cyber gang, known as Benny Skay, a Ukrainian citizen, was arrested in Spain. They didn't reveal more details about his arrest, but they mentioned that the case is still under investigation. Of course, for Europol, capturing someone like this, one of the masterminds behind the largest hacking operations in the world, is a huge achievement. But the shocking thing is that this arrest didn't stop their operations at all. They continue to carry out thefts to this day. And they're not just stealing from banks, they're also targeting global institutions and companies. Imagine that to this day. The Cyberattacks group's thefts have amounted to millions from banks, and they're continuing to evolve, advancing in their operations, and no one can stop them. Honestly, the details of their thefts were incredibly complex, and I couldn't cover them all because they're too intricate, and only someone who understands this field would fully grasp them. And that's it for our video today. If you're not subscribed, dear viewer, I hope you subscribe so our channel can grow and you can receive all the latest content from this channel. Let me know what you'd like to see in the next video. Until then,